welcome back to the Lincoln Institute podcast. A little bit of a change today. My name is Hannah. I will be stepping in for Nick, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with Miss Riley Gaines. How are you today?
I am doing so great. I am so excited to be here interviewing with you, so thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Welcome to California.
I know, right?
Everyone says it is. Orange County's beautiful. Where did your love of swimming begin? I think, were you always a swimmer? Did you ever play other sports? Was it like a family thing that everyone in your family was swimming? Why swimming?
So I started swimming when I was 4. I didn't really get overly competitive until I was about 8 years old, and that's when I started swimming year-round. So this meant that, of course, in 2nd grade, you're swimming 2 hours every single day, and it really only gets worse from there because by the time high school, middle school, you're practicing 2 hours before school, then you go to school, and you come back from school, and you go practice more. So it was a lot, but I did what a lot of kids do. I played a lot of sports growing up. Actually, I thought I was going to go to college to play softball, but I ultimately ended up choosing swimming. But I come from a family of athletes. My dad, he was an SEC football player. My mom, she played Division I softball. My dad went on to play in the NFL. All my uncles played in the NFL.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really cool.
My 6th cousin, actually, his name is Reeducation Gaines, who is a Hall of Famer swimmer, an Olympian, and so I do have some swimming in my bloodlines. But I just grew up in a family of sports, and so we were always pushed to play sports, not for any other reason than what the value of sport brings, which is, of course, outside of athletic achievement, the characteristics you develop, which can be translated far beyond your athletic career.
Yeah, of course. And so you mentioned that you also played softball, before you initially chose swimming. So do you sometimes look back on that and think how, if you did choose softball, how different your life would be now? And are you happy that you chose swimming?
Totally.
Obviously for the greater issue, obviously now it's no athlete wants
Absolutely.
to have a path other than just winning and having titles. And so are you happy that you chose swimming, or do you kind of look back and and reflect on how different your life would have been?
My life would certainly be different if I ended up choosing softball and choosing that to be my career path. I look back and I should have chose softball because, sorry, softball players, it's easier than swimming. You don't have to hold your breath. You're not starved of oxygen. You actually get to talk to your friends during practice. Ultimately, I think God has his hand on this. I think he's had his hand on this entire situation, being where I am now, fighting for what I'm fighting for. Even in regards to the situation that brought me here, which was ultimately a tie with a male. I think that, when you're racing for 1 minute and 40 seconds like Leah Thomas and I did, and we went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, that's God, having his hand on it. And so my life would certainly be different. It would probably be less stressful. I would get a lot less backlash if I played softball. But I'm proud to be where I am. I'm proud to be fighting for what I'm fighting for, and I'm proud to be sitting here with you. So
thank you. No, I feel the same. I'm like, what you said, I'm like, yeah, God put someone like you in that position because they knew that you would stand up for, what is true. And, standing up for other women that maybe don't have the platform or don't have the voice or maybe don't even have the courage to do so. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the University of Kentucky. What, makes you proud to be a former Wildcat? What were the pros and cons of swimming at Kentucky?
So I knew I wanted to be in the SEC. Again, sorry, I think the SEC is the best conference. It's the most competitive conference, especially as it pertains to swimming. And so, again, my dad being former SEC, all my uncles played in the SEC. I knew that's what I wanted to do. My sister went to Ole Miss. And so I actually thought I was going to be a Florida Gator. That's what I had dreamed for myself ever since I was in elementary school, 5th grade. But I took my trip to Florida, which is this renowned swimming school. It's known for its swimming, at least in the swimming world. And so I took my trip there, but I didn't get that feeling of home that I was told you get. And so I continued on with my trips. I had no interest in the University of Kentucky at first. They were not good at swimming. They were middle of the pack, closer to the bottom of the barrel. And this coach, he kept pestering me to take a visit. To be totally frank, I was pretty heavily recruited and I wasn't interested. But my boyfriend at the time, who's not the man I'm married to now, he was a big Kentucky fan. And so I thought, okay, they're inviting me to a basketball game. I can bring a +1. I'll just go. I'll take advantage of this coach. I'll take my boyfriend, and it'll be like a cool Christmas gift for him. But really, I went, and that coach who was a pest is my best friend still to this day. I had the most phenomenal experience there. I loved the city. I loved the campus. I loved the resources that they poured into us outside of just athletic achievement. How they poured into our academics, our community service. That stuck out to me. No other school really showed me that when I was taking these trips. And so I went out on a whim and I committed to the university. I didn't even tell my parents I was doing that. I just did it. I felt called to do it, right? Like that feeling of home, I got that at Kentucky. And looking back, it was certainly the place for me. And I don't think I could have had a better experience at any other university.
Yeah, of course. Are you still like pretty close with some of your teammates?
I am.
And like obviously everything that's happened that, unfolded the last couple years, how do you feel like your relationship is with a lot of your teammates? Or is it kind of like 50-50? Or most of them really supportive? Or a lot of them there for you?
So I was team captain of my team of 40 girls, which is a pretty, imagine being on a team with 40 girls.
Oh yeah.
It's like our own
sorority.
It's like our
girl.
own sorority.
So I get it.
Yes. And so I was team captain, meaning I was essentially the liaison between our coaches and our team, and leading our team to success and guiding our team, setting goals. That's a big piece of what I did. And so being team captain of 40 girls, I made sure to facilitate the conversation surrounding the issue of what we face, which is, of course, allowing men into our sports and into our locker rooms. I wanted everyone to know that they could be comfortable and vulnerable in sharing exactly how they felt. I didn't want anyone to feel silence, regardless of how you felt, whether it's in agreement with me or disagreement. But of my team of 40 girls, 38 of them feel the exact same way I do.
That's good.
So I haven't lost friends. I haven't, they want you to think you'll be canceled, but I haven't lost friends. My coach has been incredibly supportive of me. My teammates are incredibly supportive. My family, my athletic director. I have felt support pour in from my university.
That makes me happy.
Yes, it's a blessing because talking to other girls at other universities, this is not the case. They do not have that experience. And I don't know if it's because their coaches shy away. I don't know if it's because the captains didn't facilitate the conversations. I don't know what it is. Do these coaches really think that what we went through is okay and fair and just? I choose to believe they can't actually think that, but they're throwing their moral compass out of the window, which is why I say it's a blessing. I ended up at University of Kentucky.
For a reason. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The way that I see it, like at the end of the day, I think the hardest conversation to have is the cost of, as a woman, if obviously you say this makes me uncomfortable, even if it was a different situation, A, B, and C makes me uncomfortable, and other women are behind me and backing me. So why does like Leah's Thomas's feelings matter more than mine? Why does making sure that that they're comfortable, that they're not offended, that, they feel like, and they're in a safe space because of a decision that they made, why does that come over my consent?
Exactly.
As a woman, I feel like that, I was actually just talking about this with a friend the other day, the biggest word is consent.
Absolutely.
That a lot of this is you know what, I did not consent to this. I did not consent to this. So
absolutely. And
how do we go about that?
That's the word.
It's hard.
That the left has loved to use in the past, especially in regards to the original
Why is it different now?
Movement. Right, exactly. We've seen this feminist movement, the first wave and second wave of the feminist movement, and we've seen the left typically embrace this and honor and celebrate and recognize and uphold women because they're women and we're different than men. And we acknowledge this for at least in regards to sports since 1972 when Title IX was enacted. So 51 years we've acknowledged this, and now suddenly we're seeing the script entirely change. And the left, who once embraced this idea of upholding femininity, has abandoned this idea. Now it's the right, Republicans, conservatives, who are seizing this opportunity to protect women based on our own sex-based rights and protections, which is incredibly interesting. I think we can often ask ourselves the question of where are the feminists? Why aren't they fighting for us? Where is Megan Rapinoe and Billie Jean King, who is someone we really have to accredit Title IX to? And now both of these women who while I don't agree with, especially Megan Rapinoe, while I don't agree with a lot of, her politics, we can't deny she was a trailblazer for women in women's sports and fighting for equal pay and equal access and equal resources. And now both Megan Rapinoe, Billie Jean King, and a slew of other professional athletes with influence and platforms have abandoned and totally undermined their mission to fight for women. And now they're advocating for men to enter into our spaces, take away our opportunities, our scholarships, our spots on the podium, our privacy and safety in our locker rooms. And it goes back to that word consent, because I can guarantee you, we did not consent.
Did you consent?
Absolutely.
I
did not consent.
Did you consent to changing in the same facility as a male?
No, never in my life, other than my husband. That is never something that I would be okay with. That's not something my dad was okay with. My husband, he didn't want me to do that. And it's not because, just the fact that he knew that that's a vulnerable place to be in, and you're putting a male with male parts and male eyes into that room where we're undressing. 2 years, 3, 4 years ago, this would have been considered sexual harassment. This would have been considered voyeurism, indecent exposure, and this person would be arrested. But now, Thomas wasn't arrested. The slew of other men who are doing this in women's locker rooms and prisons and sororities, they're not arrested.
That's the thing.
They're celebrated.
People don't understand that it really is. It's everywhere.
Everywhere.
I've also told my friends, I think when I first moved back to California in February, I was at Disneyland. And there was a man in the women's restroom.
It's everywhere. It's happening.
It happened like you said, every woman has an experience, and whether they're okay with it, whether they're not. Obviously, I am not, but it's one of those things that it is way more common than you would ever think.
This war on women is stemming. When I was directly impacted, I only saw it as women's sports, but it's coming from academia, where they're changing language that we use. It's no longer woman or mother, it's birthing person or birth giver, cervix haver, uterus owner, menstruator, bleeder, bonus hole. That's the most crazy term I've ever heard. But it's happening in the media. It's happening in corporate America. We've seen it with Bud Light. We've seen it with Target, and all this war on women. It's so, and ultimately the war on the truth is so much bigger than this topic of women in sports. In prisons in California alone, in recent weeks, there was over 1,500 or 1,600 men apply to be women, to get into women's prisons, which sounds wonderful to a rapist or someone who's committed heinous crimes. And they're getting into women's prisons. They're impregnating women. Not only in California.
Terrible things happen because of it.
Yes, it's happening in New Jersey, Ohio, Kansas. All over. And so to believe that it's a non-issue, or that it's not really happening, or there's just a few biological men who are competing in women's sports, is a lie. It cannot be further from the truth.
These people, what they do behind closed doors, do whatever you want to do behind closed doors, but when it becomes a problem is when it hurts other people.
Right.
And at this, in this topic, it's affecting women. So how do we kind of go forward, looking at what is maybe a solution, a possible solution, a couple possible solutions? How do we kind of make everyone happy, or try to make everyone happy?
Absolutely. I think in regards to sports, there's a order of hierarchy of things you have to prioritize. Number one being safety. That should be the first thing we prioritize in sport. 2 should be fairness. And that's, of course, people often, when you say we should advocate for fairness in sports, they'll say, well, what about Michael Phelps? He has biological advantages like longer limbs and a greater lung capacity. That's not what we're talking about. Developmentally, Michael Phelps is the same as any other male who's gone through male puberty. That's what we're advocating for. So safety, fairness, and then we can prioritize inclusion, but we cannot do it at the expense of safety and fairness. And so solutions, I've been traveling state to state advocating for fairness in women's sports and testifying on behalf of fairness in women's sports bills. California has not implemented one yet.
Surprise.
But we will be working to get it done. And so advocating for fairness in women's sports, and what that looks like is you compete with your biological sex. I think that's the simplest solution that still enables everyone a chance to compete, everyone a chance for athletic success. I don't understand how it's controversial, because you compete where it's fair and where it's safe. And everyone can compete. No one is discriminated against on the basis of your sex or your race or your age or what sport you play. Everyone can, and I encourage everyone to compete, actually. As I mentioned previously, there's so much benefit to playing sports that nobody should be denied of. The left will say that these bills being passed are anti-trans bills that ban trans athletes from competing. Let me reiterate loud and clear, no one is being banned from competing, and everyone should compete in sports. You just compete where it's fair and where it's safe. And so I think that's the simplest and easiest solution. You compete with your biological sex. But there is some talk now of a third category, which we've just seen swimming. FINA, the International Governing Body of Swimming, has implemented, which is a third category that's essentially like an open category for non-binary individuals or trans-identifying individuals, so they have a space where they feel included. What we're seeing with this solution is it's not enough. The people who would compete in this open division aren't happy, and that to me shows me that they don't want equality. They don't want to be equal, because that's what this category is. It's equal to what we as women have and what men have. But they don't want equality. They want to take away our rights, and they want to infringe upon our fairness in our sports, which shows you, and again, this doesn't apply to every single person who's trans, but it shows you how there are some trans-identifying individuals who are opportunists and who just want to take advantage of the system that's in place, and which is being done with us as women becoming the collateral damage in the process.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, a lot of these things should be common sense. The hardest thing for me, and like that is most frustrating, maybe you obviously feel the same way, is why is it so controversial to say, men should compete against men and women should compete against women? Like, how did we come as a society to that is controversial, and that is, anti-trans, or that's discriminating against them? It's like, in the way that we see it, I think we're focused on protecting women and women's sports. We're not anti-trans.
Absolutely.
So how, going forward, how are we going to get that message to the other side, to the people that disagree with it, that say that we're transphobic or that we're discriminating? That's, I think, what we're going to struggle with going forward, because we know what's right and what's true, but
Absolutely.
How do we present that to them and really try to sway them and say, we're not doing this to be harmful. We're doing this to, protect women.
I think that messaging is incredibly important and really effective. This is a pro-woman argument. It's not anti-anything, and I think that was beautifully said, and I wish even Republican lawmakers could understand that. We need to frame this argument around, what about us? What message is this sending to us? Do we not matter? Does our privacy, our safety, our fairness, our dignity, our mental health, our feelings, the list goes on, does that not matter? And I think we need to frame it around that. But in regards to your question of why, right? Why is this happening? Why do they want men in our locker rooms? Why? What's the bigger picture?
This wasn't a thing 10 years ago.
No.
Why now? How? To me, this is honestly a question that I don't even know the answer to. How did we get to this point? That this is something that we never thought would be controversial is.
I want to say first and foremost, biology is not bigotry. Why? My answer to this question of why, being a Christian, I entirely see this as spiritual warfare, which the Bible prophesizes we will be in a time such as this, where our yeses are no's and our no's are yeses. We're living it. It's no longer really right versus wrong or good versus bad. This really is moral versus evil. But secondly, why? If you look at the denying of objective truth, and you look at the silencing, and you look at the changing of the language that I mentioned previously in regards to woman and mother and how those are now deemed controversial, and you look at the breakdown of faith and the breakdown of family and the breakdown of our freedoms, such as freedom of speech, this is textbook Marxism. It's textbook, and you can open any history book and see how that turns out for any civilization, and it's not pretty. Yet our administrators, the people leading this country, the people in the White House right now, they're leading us down this downward spiral, and it's a slippery slope, and it's step by step we're going down it, which should open a lot of eyes. And this is not something that, this should be nonpartisan. We should all agree that we don't want to turn into a communist country. Talk to people from North Korea or China or Russia or Germany or Brazil or Venezuela or Cuba, and they will tell you that what we're going through is the beginning steps. And I think that's why they want to blur these lines between gender, between really objective truth, and asking us to deny man versus woman is asking us to deny that the sky is blue. This is the most basic truth.
Feelings over facts. I think the way that we see things, we put facts before feelings. They're putting feelings before facts.
And again, back to how we can be effective as showing emotion, doing it, of course, in a compassionate and...
Play their game.
Absolutely.
Let's play their game.
Absolutely. How about follow the science, right? Let's play their game. Let's follow the science.
Like you said, it's not anti-trans, it's pro-women. So maybe I think we do need to get a little bit more emotional about that.
Yeah.
Maybe that we do to say, as a woman, that makes me really emotional. That makes me hurt. That scares me. And if we just keep putting that up, which is, I mean, we're not faking anything. It's true.
Yeah.
These feelings are not lies. Like,
no.
Maybe that is what we need to start doing.
And
play their game.
I think so. And we've seen the left embrace this idea of not victim blaming, but now they are.
Yeah.
They're telling us that us as women who were victims of a sexual harassment, sexual assault in that locker room, they're telling us as victims, that we should just be comfortable with it. We were forced to go to Reeducation meetings from the LGBTQ Center to learn about how just by being cisgender, we were oppressing Leah Thomas, and attempts to re-educate us on our feelings and on our emotions. Yes, and I don't think people realize.
So elaborate on that a little bit. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So was it mandatory? Like, how did that come about?
Thomas's teammates had to go to mandatory weekly meetings where that's exactly what they did. It was held at the LGBTQ Education Center, and simply they learned that being cisgender, they were immediately oppressors, and they were oppressing Thomas, who is of course transgender. And it was an attempt to re-educate them. When they were uncomfortable in the locker room and they sent an email to their administration expressing their discomfort in this setting, their administration responded back with, and I swear I have a screenshot of the email, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here's some counseling resources that you need to seek. That is what the emotional blackmail we are facing looks like. That is what the victim blaming that we're receiving. We're told that we should apologize for feeling uncomfortable in that locker room. We're told we have to smile when we step aside on the podiums to allow these men to take our spots. And that's asking us to lie. And I don't think people understand. That's why I've been this lone voice and this lone face fighting for this, because they're effective in how they silence us. They told us that we would be murderers if we spoke out about this because Leah Thomas could potentially harm himself. We don't want to be murderers, but that's how they keep us quiet. And there's a ton more tactics that they use. And truth be told, it's really similar to the same tactics they used when we were going through COVID. And I only drew this parallel recently. In regards to being an athlete during that time where they tried to force us to get the vaccine, they told us we would harm others if we didn't. They told us that if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to compete, we wouldn't be able to travel. You're hurting your team if you don't do it. And I stood up for myself and I said, you can't make me get the vaccine. And did I hurt anyone? No. Was I still able to travel and swim? Of course. They wanted to scare us into getting it. And so I think that COVID time period and how I learned to stand up to authority then, it really helped me now because, again, it's the same tactics they use. And I only just recently drew these parallels, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, that is. I mean, like you said, so those classes, so say, for example, if you obviously now, like even looking back, like when I was in college, I saw, like you said, like some parallels that if I were to stand up for, my, obviously being UC Irvine in Southern California, it's more of a left-leaning school.
But of course, they have no grounds to enforce those. Yeah. And I was able to see that because, again, the COVID stuff prepared me. I was able to see that ethically and that legally, they couldn't discriminate based off Title IX itself. Title IX is the federal civil rights law that says you cannot discriminate on the basis of someone's sex. And what we were dealing with was explicitly that. And so I think there needs to be a lawsuit, and it's something that I'm curious into looking into because, I mean, they explicitly violated a federal law that now the Biden administration is purposefully trying to rewrite. But yeah, they made us think there would be consequences. They told us we would never get into grad school if we spoke out. We would never get a job. You would be labeled as a transphobe forever, and you don't want that, do you? No, so I suggest you be kind. I suggest you be inclusive. But the fear tactics that they use, again, remember on my team, 38 of us felt the exact same way, 38 out of 40. And it's not because we had 38 Republicans on the team. It's because we had 38 girls who cared about working hard, who cared about their success, and who could call out an injustice when they saw it. But yet I'm one of the few taking a public stand. And it's because those tactics, they worked. While they're not based in anything that can actually be done, truth be told, they work. And I have empathy towards those individuals who know this is wrong but don't speak out. I understand. Look at even professional athletes. I can tell you that I've had private conversations with a slew of really well-known professional athletes who have acknowledged how this is wrong and who thank me for doing what I'm doing, yet they can't speak out because they're scared of losing sponsorships. They're scared of ultimately,
a lot of
yes.
people, I mean, they do. There's so many people that speak out and they lose their livelihood. And I mean, this is so far polar, but there's some people that speak out and lose their life. I mean, that is a thing. It happens. Like I said, it's very rare, but I mean, you could lose your job, you could lose
it's really
your
not,
family, you could lose your friends, but you could also be harmed.
It's really actually
scary.
not overly rare. I have conversations, again, being in the position that I'm in, I get messages all the time from parents or coaches or medical professionals, even female athletes themselves, who tell me, share their experience, and of course remind me that mine is not unique. I just talked to a professor from Harvard who had worked there for over 20 years, and she was the co-director of the undergraduate studies of human evolutionary biology, meaning she's extremely qualified to talk on this topic. And she was recently fired from Harvard for using the terms male and female because it's not gender exclusive or gender inclusive. Even at University of Pennsylvania, they're not allowed to say freshman anymore because it has the word man in it. They have to refer to themselves as first years. It's crazy. And again, the threat is very real. Even my coach, who has been incredibly supportive of me, was just forced into resigning over all of this stuff for showing me support. It's not like people don't understand how often it's happening and how readily people, I mean, their lives do dramatically change. You do lose family members. You do lose your friends. You are labeled the names for speaking out. But I will say that shouldn't scare you, because name calling, which I do receive, right? I get labeled everything as, transphobic, homophobic. Yeah.
It's like
racist.
16-year-old high school mean girls all over again, and we're in our, almost 30 now. It's like, gosh,
and once you
when
can
does it end?
recognize that it is just name calling, they can't dissuade from our argument, and they know that, and so they resort to name calling. They resort to petty personal attacks, which should give you hope that we are on the right side, because we have science on our side, we have truth on our side, and quite frankly, we have common sense on our side. So
yeah, and like you said, like they mentioned earlier, we put facts before feelings. They put feelings before facts, but at the end of the day, like, facts will always,
prevail.
That's what the world revolves around.
Yeah. Well, it's what Ronald Reagan says. He says, if you can't stand for truth,
you'll fall
then
for
you'll
anything,
fall
right?
for, yes.
But I remember George W. Bush saying it, like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I'll never get fooled again.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thank you for everything. So give us just a couple updates. What's next?
Lots of good things are happening.
What's happening? Yeah.
Lots of good things. While this conversation, of course, it tends to be pretty grim and it shows a lot of despair, there are a lot of good things happening, and I'm appreciating every little win along the way to the bigger battle, or the bigger war. After this, I'm flying to Oklahoma, where I will be standing alongside Governor Stitt to sign into effect the Women's Bill of Rights, which is a bill that I worked closely with his state to help sign into effect. And what the Women's Bill of Rights is a law that defines the word woman, which is crazy that we need, but working alongside a group called Independent Women's Forum and myself to get this passed, first in Kansas, then in my home state of Tennessee, now in Oklahoma. We'll be continuing to advocate for that. There are 22 states that have passed some sort of fairness in women's sports bill. Again, California not being one of them, but we're on it. And so that's great news, considering just a few years ago there was only 3 states who had passed such bill. So good stuff there. In regards to specific sport governing bodies, we have, again, FINA, which is the International Governing Body of Swimming, World Athletics, which is the international governing body of track and field, and UCI, which is the same for cycling, have all taken a stance in prioritizing fairness and saying if you have gone through male puberty, you cannot compete with the women. So lots of good things this past year. In a short span of time, right? Only a year, we've seen a lot of bold first moves. And I think this will only continue as people start to open their eyes and realize the threat that this imposes, again, not just on women, but on the truth. And so I'm hopeful for the future. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to see things get worse before they get better. But this idea that we're entertaining right now, that men can ever be women, people will realize that that is just not the case and will be emboldened and empowered enough to stand for what's right.
Yeah, totally agree. And like you mentioned that there's 22 states that have already signed some things into act. I just noticed that you were with Governor Kristi Noem the other day. We love her. So just off the top of your head, like what states would you be like, oh my gosh, they're really going overtime to help me and help my cause? It's just off the top of your head.
It's the states you would probably imagine, right? It's your Texas, it's your Tennessee, it's your Florida.
Good.
I will say the states that have required more effort, or let's say important states, right? We need to get Michigan. We need to get California. We need to get New York. We need to get these states that are essentially ran both in the House and the Senate by Democrats. We need to get them on board. And again, I'm hopeful. We saw in Alabama recently, 17 Democrats voted in favor of protecting women and girls in sports. And so if we work on our messaging, if we work on how we communicate the issues and the threats that are being imposed on women, I think this is a way forward. And again, as it continues to happen and more girls are hurt in their sport, more girls are exploited in a locker room, more girls lose out on opportunities.
We don't have an option.
People will be forced to take a stand and protecting us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many, it's scary to think about how many women need to get hurt, prioritize protecting them and their safety over hurting feelings. So
absolutely. And again, I'm hopeful. I really am. Onward. I'm going to continue fighting tooth and nail to make sure that no girl, no woman, no person has to go through what myself and my teammates and my competitors and girls all around the country are going through. And
like you said, I mean, I think we touched on it right at the beginning. This is also outside of sports. It's, women getting raped in a random bathroom, in a public or a restaurant or just a gas station. I mean, it has happened. I've seen news headlines, and that's the scary thing. It's we're not discriminating because we don't want, transgenders to compete. We don't want them to compete. That's not true. It's literally because it's so far outside of that it applies everywhere.
Absolutely.
That we just don't want women to get hurt. We don't want women to get raped. It's frustrating. I think that we share that. That's why is that controversial?
We're asking for the bare minimum.
Yeah,
the bare minimum, which is why I'm hopeful. Because again, when you're asking for the bare minimum, privacy, safety, fairness in our sports, and again, broader than just sports, you have to believe that we will get that bare minimum in due time.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes, that happened to you, but what about the racist people who are setting fire to buildings? I mean, just the combat is almost comical that you receive. And so that was a few weeks ago. And then recently I testified in front of the Senate on behalf of the broader picture of LGBTQ issues, and I was one of the Republican witnesses to testify on my experience in competing against Leah Thomas and changing in a locker room with Thomas and what that looked like and how we really felt on that pool deck. And it was really powerful. I actually feel like this was a more effective hearing. I felt like both sides listened, and I actually felt like we made good ground here. I was able to real-time fact check the lady next to me who was the president of the Human Rights Campaign. Her name is Kelly Robinson. She went on to make these claims and spread misinformation, really spew these lies that, oh, well, Serena Williams gets beat all the time in tennis by men. To which I was able to tell her, look, Serena Williams lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, and Serena Williams is a phenom for women. So your argument is entirely invalid, which went pretty viral. There was a congressional hearing last week in front of Congress about Title IX and different things. Actually, the hearing was about gender-affirming care, but they had one of Leah Thomas's teammates testify. And her name is Paula Scanlon. She did a phenomenal job, and her experience is unique because she was on a team with Thomas, meaning she had to undress in front of a male 18 times every single week, which is traumatic. I mean, she tells me she still has nightmares about this experience. It really is. And so Again, when we have an administration who is working to rewrite Title IX, which gave women so many opportunities outside of just sports. Title IX is broader than just sports, but of course, a main implication is within sports. We have an administration rewriting it entirely to where now men can live in dorm rooms with women. Men can have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces on campus. Men can join sororities. Men would, of course, take academic and athletic scholarships away from women. Doing everything I can to combat that at the federal level. Working alongside Representative Greg Stubbe, who introduced this bill on the House side, which passed the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, but it fell entirely on party lines, meaning all 203 Democrat representatives in the U.S. House voted in opposition of protecting women and girls in sports, which blows my mind because I don't understand how this could be so partisan. But also in the U.S. Senate, working with Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama to do the exact same on the Senate side, to which was not as hopeful this past year. So good strides being made there as well, but we need a new administration in the White House in 2024 who will put America back on track. The Biden administration, don't even get me started on the press secretary. I won't even say her name. They're horrendous, and they're
absolutely
an abomination to what we as women have fought for. They're so destroying
offensive.
that.
It's so offensive. We're so lucky to have women like you that are just, going to stand up for what's right at all costs, because I think we're in the same age range and same value-wise that, what happens with our daughters one day?
Absolutely.
When one day when my daughter is going through high school sports and when she's, God willing, is a college athlete, what would it even look like then? Like, that's scary to think about, because if we don't stand up now, it's only going to get worse down the road. And like you said, we're past it. We will never be in high school again. We'll never be in college again. That part is out of our lives, but to protect, the next generation is, to me, and I think to you, is just so crucial, so important. And, protect our babies. My gosh,
Absolutely.
It scares me to think about.
If not now, when? And if not us, then who? Who? So I appreciate you so much for interviewing me.
Thank you so much. Welcome to California again.
Yes. And thank you to all the listeners who listened. I'm excited.
Yes.
Onward.
Onward and upward.